Welcome to Arcade Labs. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this cool Pac-Man figure from walnut hardwood on the CNC machine. We'll start by reviewing how it was designed in CarveCo Maker, then we'll run the job on the CNC machine, and finally we'll sand and apply finish to the final piece. Let's get into it. Here we have a Pac-Man model that I created in CarveCo Maker. There's three parts to the geometry of this Pac-Man. We have the outside perimeter, we have this inside perimeter, and we have Pac-Man's eye. Each of these areas will have a separate toolpath configured. The outside perimeter will be a profile cut where we have the bit cut all the way through the material. This will give us the round Pac-Man shape. For the inside perimeter, we will have an area clearance toolpath configured. What this will do is it'll clear out all the material in this area down to a certain depth inside the perimeter. And lastly, we have Pac-Man's eye, which will be a raised area inside the area cleared by the previous toolpath. And that'll make probably more sense when we look at the 3D view. Let's take a closer look at the toolpath definitions. For the area clearance toolpath, we have the finish depth set to 0.5 inches. What this means is that the machine will clear a ½ inch depth from the surface of the materials. Also for this toolpath, we have configured the bit to follow the inside of the line. For the eye, we have the finish depth set to 0.25 inches, and this means that it will extend a ¼ inch above the surrounding cleared area. For the outside, we have a profile cut with a finish depth set to 0.85 inches. This will cut all the way through the material and leave us with the round Pac-Man shape. These four items here you can see are called bridges, and they are basically small pieces of wood that are left in place to keep the intersection attached to the outer panel of wood, and this keeps it from moving around while the piece is being cut. After we're done machining the piece, we'll cut off these bridges, and that'll free the Pac-Man from the outer panel. CarveCo Maker has a feature to simulate the tool paths so you can see what the project will look like when it's carved. We can click up here on tool paths and then say simulate all tool paths, and this gives us a 3D view of what the final piece will look like when it's carved. This feature is really useful for verifying that things are configured correctly. It can save you from wasting material doing carves that don't come out correctly. So we can see here that we've got the outside profile cut, and then inside where we have a cut that goes down a ½ inch, and then we have Pac-Man's eye here, which is a ¼ inch above the surrounding surface. For some reason, the simulation sometimes leaves these little pieces in place. Most of the time, this doesn't actually show up in the actual carve. Another thing that we could look at is those the bridges that I mentioned earlier. So the bridges are these little pieces of wood that are left in place so the overall the Pac-Man doesn't separate from the outside panel, before we want it to. So the final cut will be this outside profile cut, but it will leave these bridges in place. And then once we're done, we'll take it off the machine and we'll use an oscillating tool just to cut these bridges, and then that will free Pac-Man from the outside material. All right, let's take the project to the shop and carve it on the CNC machine. Let's pick out a piece of material for this project. We need something that's at least 13 or 14 inches wide, so I was thinking one of these walnut panels here would do. All right, the first step is to cut off a piece of the walnut panel. The CNC machine that we'll be using is an Elite Foreman by Onefinity. It has a 4-foot by 4-foot work surface. The end mill that we'll be using is a 1/4-inch downcut spiral bit. Let's go ahead and put the bit in the machine. All right, let's tell the controller that we have the bit installed and let it zero the Z-axis. All right, now we're going to secure our material to the work surface. I transferred the project file over Wi-Fi to the controller here, so let's go ahead and load it. There we go. All right, the next thing we're going to do is calibrate the Z height. We're going to use a touch probe to allow the machine to determine what the Z height is of the top of the material. So over here, we're going to do this, tell it to do this, and now the machine's going to slowly lower the bit down until it touches the touch probe, and that will tell it the exact height of the top of the material. One thing that's important to do is to measure the thickness of the material and compare that to what's configured in the project file. In the project file, I believe the thickness of the material is set to 0.8 inches thick. And this matters most for the profile cut that's going to cut out the outer perimeter because it needs to go all the way through the material and probably cut into the waste boards here a little bit. And that profile cut is set to 0.85 inches deep. So let's take a look and see how thick this actually is. So this is 0.82 inches thick. So that means the profile cut is going to cut 3/100ths of an inch into the waste board down here. So that should be enough to fully cut out the Pac-Man. Normally when operating the CNC, I always have the dust boot installed on the spindle here like this. And this allows the dust collection, the suction here, to pick up the chips. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to leave this off so we can see what's going on better. And that means I'll have to manually suck up the chips periodically with a hand vacuum. All right, let's go ahead and start the job. The machine is starting with the area clearance toolpath. This part will carve out the inside area of the project. The step-down rate of the cutting bit is 0.125 inches. This means that the area clearance toolpath will need to make 4 passes to complete the work. Each pass will take off 0.125 inches of the material. As I previously mentioned, I would normally have the dust boot on the machine and it would automatically suck up all of the wood chips. But for the purpose of this video, we have it off so we can see the cutting bit more closely and what it's doing. Here on the controller, we can see the machine actually following the tool path. The machine is finishing pass 1 of the area clearance toolpath. So far it's taken off 0.125 inches of material, and now it's starting pass 2. And now we're starting pass 3 of the area clearance toolpath. And we just skipped to the final pass. The machine is now going to finish some parts of the first toolpath that were left until the end. I'm not sure why the software leaves these areas to the end, but it may have been the most optimal way to deal with these special areas. The machine is now starting the second toolpath, which is Pac-Man's eye. Alright, we're now on to the final tool path, which is the outer perimeter profile cut. This is going to take 6 passes because the cutting bit will take off 0.125 inches on each pass. We just skipped ahead to the final pass. And that is it. The job is complete. All right, the carve is complete. Let's go ahead and take a look at the final result here. Looks good. Let's go ahead and take this off the work surface. All right, it's unexpected that the two pieces are separated. The bridges that we previously discussed should have kept the two pieces connected. Earlier, when we measured the thickness of the material, I commented that the material thickness was not exactly the same as what was configured in the project. I thought it was close enough, but obviously I should have gone back and updated the project. The bridges should be aligned with the bottom offset that's specified in the material setup configuration. It looks like the bottom offset was off enough that it placed the bridges below the bottom of the material. I'll have to be more careful about those settings in the future. All right, first thing, we're going to run Pac-Man through the drum sander. we're going to continue sanding and start with a 120 grit sandpaper. Continuing with 180 grit. And finally 220. Next up, we're going to be sanding the inside areas of the Pac-Man. One of the constraints is that this is kind of a small space, and your typical random orbital sander can't get in here because it's too tight. So for this job, we're going to be using a detail sander that can get into the corners and get all these areas. Next, we're going to sand the outer edges. All right, and the final step is I'm going to sand all of these edges here. All right, that should do it. All right, now that we're finished sanding the piece, the next step is to apply a finish. And we have a number of options for finish. We could use a polyurethane finish. We could go with a Danish oil. That always works well. There's Odie's oil. But for this case, I think I'm going to go with a food grade mineral oil. Mineral oils are easy to apply, they dry fast, and they are food safe. So if you were to use this in the kitchen or for serving food, they would be completely safe for that. Now it's time to apply the finish. We'll apply a generous amount of mineral oil. You can see the oil really brings out the beauty of the walnut. It's amazing how much darker the wood is with the finish applied. The idea with the mineral oil is to flood the piece and let the oil really soak in. It's good to go over the same area multiple times because it allows the oil to soak in as much as possible. Now we'll do the back. All right, we've got the back covered fairly well. I'm going to do one more pass on the front to make sure we've really saturated the wood. Now it's time to let it dry. All right, the piece has been sitting with the oil applied for about an hour. What we're going to do now is wipe off all the excess oil. Sometimes after wiping off the oil, you need to come back and repeat the process once or twice because oil sometimes continues to seep out of the wood over time. All right, the piece has been drying for 24 hours now, and it is done. All right, let's take a look at the final piece. The CNC job went well, and the sanding and the finish came out nice. I'm a little bit curious what this would look like in a different species of wood, such as maple or maybe cherry. The next question is, what should I do with this? And I'm thinking that I'll probably hang it on the wall here somewhere in the game room. As always, thanks for watching the video, and I hope to see you on the next one.